This is what people usually think of as embroidery thread. It won't be as shiny. Shinier the better, I would say. So you like sewing videos then? That green skirt video has gone viral by my standards. So I'm gonna take that as a hint that you want to see me doing more sewing. Yes, of course I will make more since you like them so much and since I kind of like sewing, but I also want to make it clear I can't do these kind of videos all the time. I think it's probably fairly obvious that I can't churn out something that elaborate every week. What I do want to do today is to give you a little heads up about what to expect this year, and also to talk a bit more about this skirt. Had some questions on that video that were just like, could you just back up and show me that waistband thing again and how to do the hook? So I thought I would do some little kind of, I'm going to be a maths teacher today. There's going to be no numbers, but we are going to work with some shapes. As for what I'm able to do this year, I say on my channel that you'll have a video every Friday. That happens a lot of the time, but there are some times during the year where that's not as feasible when we're going through enrolment periods at foundations, for example. It turns out I actually was able to produce about one every other week on average last year. So what I'm going to do this year is I'm going to promise one every other week. If we do more than that, awesome, but I'm going to promise every other week and see if we get to more than that, especially because we're doing sewing videos, especially because I've got a certain shiny dress to make, and that is coming, and that is in progress. There is news on that to come. I am looking for ideas for small things that you would like to see, so as you watch me do all of this, if there's some kind of small technique that I could do in a video easily, rather than a great big long-term 3 months of hand sewing, that would be helpful. Let's get into looking at some of these bits and pieces here. First of all, some of you wanted to see again how I did the waistband on this skirt, because it was quite an unusual method if you're used to modern dressmaking. So let's imagine that this is your skirt. This is the top edge of your skirt where you want to add a waistband. Now a modern waistband looks kind of like this. It'll have something to strengthen it, but it's basically a piece of fabric. You put right sides of the waistband piece together with the skirt, you sew along there, and you press and fold it over so that eventually the waist of your skirt is enclosed inside the waistband. And that works very well, and it's very easy to do on a machine. But if you imagine now a Victorian skirt with tons and tons and tons of fabric in the back and tons of pleats, now when you're going to enclose that inside your waistband, as that gets bulkier and is in things like wool, that's going to make the waistband quite bulky inside there. So it becomes a bit impractical to have the edge of the skirt encased inside the waistband. And the point, of course, with a Victorian skirt is you want your waist to look as small as possible in the 19th century. They did it differently back then. So what they would do is they'd finish off their waistband, as you saw me do in the video. I had a piece of waist tape like this, but I'd put a piece of the green fabric on the back. So here's our waistband. Here again is our skirt. And what we want to do is to attach the skirt to the waistband edge to edge. So what we actually do is fold the top edge over, and we need to sew those two together. If it's pleated first, you know there's going to be a lot of bulk there. So all the bulk is out of the way of the waistband, and the waistband is just this strip. We have the skirt here, the top folded over, and now we're going to sew over and over the top. You saw me do that in the video. That's how the waistband works. Somebody asked why I used this particular fabric. This is one of my little remnants. And it's just because it was a pretty fabric, but quilting cotton is quite nice and sturdy for making a skirt out of. My grandmother used to make all my dresses when I was little, and I think there were quilting cottons she was using. She had basically one girl's dress pattern, and she used to make dress after dress after dress out of this one pattern, but all in different quilting cottons. So it kind of follows in my grandmother's footsteps. Why did I not sew it on a machine? I did sew some of it on a machine. I sewed the long seams that had already been done before the video started. All the long seams in the skirt were done by machine, but there were certain bits that I didn't like when I put the pockets in. Let me show you close up. Here's the pocket. When I turn that over, this is the inside of the pocket. Can you see how I've been able to sew the pocket very slightly inside the edge? I was able to do that because I did it by hand. Well, I mean, I did the same thing on the hem, look. So you can see a little lip of the skirt fabric on the inside, but you can't see any of this plain green fabric on the outside because I've just sewn it by hand very slightly inside the edge. The niftiest place I've seen this done, and the reason why I love this technique, is because in 2006 I made a Regency tailcoat. And if you look at the lapel here, do you notice how at the corner it's not quite sharp? You know, this corner too, it's just a little bit rounded. It would be so nice if that was a tight corner. And that is because I put this lapel on the usual method by putting right sides together and turning it to the outside. So let me recreate that effect. Again, 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm going to put them together as if this was the jacket and the lapel look like this. Jacket and the lapel piece. We have to put those, sew those together around the edge. I'm going to put them right sides together as you usually would and sew them together and turn them out. So here I've sewn my jacket and my lapel together, kind of a nice edge. The better way to do this, and instead of doing the quick way, the modern dressmaker way, a tailor would fold that edge in and sew it down, fold that edge in on the other piece, and then place them as they would appear finished and sew in that ditch by hand instead of doing it right sides together. So instead of just sewing down there on a machine and turning it out like that, he turns this edge in, tacks it down by hand, turns this edge in, tacks it down by hand, puts them together and hand sews them from the outside. Let me show you why they do that. This is the real deal. This is a vintage tailcoat that dates from 1905 and it was made in Jamestown, New York. And one of the things that I love about it is that if you look at this lapel, they have done that sewing from the outside. But here's the nifty part. When you sew the lapel on, you need to have this side visible, but not show any of this. So when the tailor hand sews these 2 edges together, he makes sure that this side is just a little bit further out so that you don't see the back. So the edges don't quite match. The edge of this side is just a tiny bit further back so you can't see it on the outside. However, when you get down to here, the edge turns over. So now it's this piece of fabric that needs to show on the outside and this that needs to be set just a tiny bit back. And that's why they do that by hand. So that this edge is a little bit further, standing a bit further out so that you don't see this edge. I mean, it wasn't like the pocket on my green skirt was the lapel on a jacket, but I just really love that technique that by hand sewing those 2 edges together, instead of sewing right sides together and banging them out, you get so much control over which of those edges is just a little bit more visible, so you can hide the one you're not supposed to see. Speaking of machines, also a question about my antique sewing machine that I unboxed in the video on Christmas Day. Why did I lift it by the handle when I took it out of the box? You remember when we opened the box, there was a note on the top saying, do not ever lift by the handle, because the handle is not supposed to lift the whole machine, it's just supposed to lift the lid off. The reason we did so anyway was because there's a great deal of that video that was edited out. But what you didn't see is the reason why I jumped into shot with the electric screwdriver with that look of glee on my face was that we'd previously spent 15 minutes with a hand screwdriver and we couldn't budge any of those screws. So I came back in with that electric screwdriver, and with the electric screwdriver we managed to get 4 out still couldn't get the ones at the bottom, so we had to rip one side of that crate off and just lift very slightly and just try to walk it out corner by corner out of one side of the crate. So it was not ideal, I should not have done it. We just couldn't get the blimmin' thing out of the box. Next question is about the hem on the back of the skirt. You remember how that piece of tarlatan that I cut off when I trimmed the hem and I added it back in, it was here and I cut it off and put it back in here. Susie commented and said, why did you cut the whole back of the skirt and cut the tarlatan? Couldn't you have taken the tarlatan off, cut the hem and then put the whole piece of tarlatan on? I'll explain what she meant. So here is the back of my skirt. We're going to imagine this is just a section off the back, and here's the curved back of the skirt, and here is my tarlatan on top. So what I did, I drew my new hemline on, and I had to cut a lot of the tarlatan off, and then I just cut the whole lot, the tarlatan and the skirt. And then, as you can see, as I cut that hem, because I needed it a bit shorter, I cut a lot of my tarlatan off. So I added that piece back in here, so I had more tarlatan at the back. So what Susie said was, why didn't you just take all the tarlatan off, then cut the hem, and then put the whole piece of tarlatan back on? I'll show you. If this is the original skirt without the tarlatan on it, I cut the hem, and now she wanted to know why I didn't do this, because I would have had missing edges here. They're no longer the same curve, so it made much more sense to do it this way, where that curve just fit fairly nicely in that little gap. Also because I'd already sewn the tarlatan all the way around the top by hand invisibly before I made that video, and I just didn't want to cut it off and do all the hand sewing again. Finally, you wanted to see how to do the skirt hooks. I showed how to do the skirt hooks with the pretty stitching on them in the video, fairly briefly, and some of you said you wanted a complete tutorial on how to do that, so let me show you how I did it. As we often say in this game, this isn't the way, it's just my way. So we're going to imagine that this is our waistband, so we're going to put our skirt hook here. This is actually a great big skirt hook for a coat, but it's nice and big so you can see it. Let's start our thread. I'm going to hide that little tail in there. 3 back stitches to start. And first of all, we do just sew this on in the usual way. The famous usual way. I'm just sewing this on totally as you would normally sew on a hook and eye, fairly firmly, so that these stitches will hold it. The embroidery will help, but I don't want to rely on it. Tie that off, sewn it in normal thread, and finish that off as I normally would too. Alright, so you've got your hook sewn on, fairly functional, not as pretty. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take some embroidery thread. Now, this is what I use for embroidering these hooks. It's also what I use for flossing on corsets. It is silk buttonhole twist. So this is lovely, beautiful, silky, shiny stuff that is probably the closest thing to what the Victorians flossed their corsets with, and I just use it for the hooks too. You could also use this stuff. This is what people usually think of as embroidery thread. It won't be as shiny, it won't be a strong way of holding the hook on, but if you've got it already sewn on well enough with normal thread, now you're just embroidering, so it doesn't need to hold it on. So you could use a couple of strands of this kind of embroidery floss if you want to. Shinier the better, I would say. This is Japanese silk buttonhole twist, and it is a joy to work with. These little cards of them have, I think, 10 meters on. It's not easy to get. I bought it at Britex Fabrics in San Francisco. Now, we're going to just buttonhole stitch over here. I'm going to thread that through the back. and leave a little tail, as before. 3 little back stitches. So I've secured my hood embroidery thread, and it's coming out on the outside of the hook. And now, buttonhole stitch. Wrap the thread all the way around in a circle and take a stitch under the hook through the waistband. So we've got a stitch over the hook and a little knot on the outside there, and then we do the same thing again. Wrap the thread all the way around, and then another stitch through here. Now we've got 2 of those gold stitches with the knot on the outside, and we just keep going around like that. You wrap the thread all the way around and take a stitch. See, there's a third, and around again, and carry on ad infinitum. Always ensuring that your stitches point towards the middle of that circle in the hook that you're sewing around, and then they'll radiate out in a pleasing sunburst. You see, I'm going right over that utilitarian stitch that I did first of all to hold the hook in place. And now that the hook is firmly in place, I can have the time of my life embroidering over it, and I'm not worrying about whether the hook is going to be shifted out of place. You see? You've got all your buttonhole stitches covering with the little knots on the outside. They don't look as impressive on this hook because it's such a big hook, but that is how it is done. And I'm going to go around the rest of that hook now until it's all complete. So I think that is about it for this week. I am going to carry on working on this hook and then, by the magic of video, show you the result. It remains to say thank you very much for watching the green skirt video. Thank you very much for watching the unboxing video. They did remarkably well. It was a big surprise, so thank you for that. Do let me know if you have any ideas for sewing related videos you might like to see. That may not be quite as elaborate, so I'm looking for ideas for in between weeks. And I'm still going to do the mindset videos, of course. Expect more peacock dress stuff soon as I get going on the corset for that. Expect a video from me every other week, every alternate weeks. We will see what we can do about doing one every week, but I will only promise one every other week from here on. So I guess I should say I will see you in 2 weeks.